They buried my husband on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, my daughter slowed the car outside a worn-down motel, tossed a key card in my lap, and said, "Stay here. We need space." She didn't park, didn't help me with my bag, just closed the door behind me like I was someone else's problem and drove away. I sat in that motel room with funeral flowers still wilting in my lap, and for the first time in my life, I realized I had been erased. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Please subscribe if you believe stories like this matter. Not for me, but for someone else out there who's been made to feel small, forgotten, or disposable. This is not just a story about grief. It's a story about survival. And it begins long before that motel key hit my knees. I was born in 1946 in a small town on the edge of the Ozarks. The kind of place where Sunday sermons were louder than family dinners. By the time I was 10, my mother had buried 2 husbands. By 12, she had married a third Royce. Royce was a hard man. Hard jaw. Hard fists. Hard liquor. He spoke like he was always daring someone to talk back. And Mama? She just kept her eyes on the stove. He never hit me. Not where it showed. But he took other things. My birthday. My voice. My sense of safety. Especially the night he brought home a strawberry cake from the Piggly Wiggly. My 14th birthday. He said I was becoming a woman. He waited until Mama stepped outside. And then he locked the door. I won't tell you every detail. Just that something broke inside me that night and never quite stitched back. Mama never asked. And I never told. When I was 17, I married a man named Mark. The kind of man who held the door without thinking, who spoke gently even when no one was listening. He never asked what Royce had done. He just loved the bruises out of me over time. We were married 54 years. Raised 1 daughter. Gave her everything we didn't have: new shoes every fall, piano lessons, braces, college tuition. And maybe, in doing so, I gave her the impression I'd always be the one sacrificing. Always bending, always fading into the background. So when Mark died, I thought she'd draw closer. But instead, she gave me a motel key and a warning. You'll figure it out. Maybe now you'll understand what it means to live within your means. The carpet in that room was damp from old rain. The air smelled like bleach and loneliness. I sat on the edge of the bed in my funeral dress and didn't move for 3 hours. And then I remembered. 2 days before the funeral, Mark had pressed a folded email into my palm. "Keep this," he said. "For your future. Just in case." I thought it was life insurance. A bill. Some gentle gesture. But it wasn't. It was a bank confirmation. A retirement account, moved quietly into both our names. $253,071. Left for me. He never told our daughter. He knew her tone had changed over the years. He had watched her love sour and didn't argue. He simply prepared. I cried then. Quietly. For him. For me. For the girl I once was and the woman I had become. The next morning, I called a lawyer. A calm man named Henry Keller. Not flashy. Just firm. The kind of man who understood how to make things stick without needing to shout. I asked him to secure the account, lock it from digital access, and review any assets my husband had co-signed. He did, and found the motel next door, the one my daughter and her husband had bought 2 years earlier, was still in Mark's estate. Co-signed, yes, but now legally mine. I didn't tell my daughter. I bought it, painted the walls, replaced the carpets, hung curtains in pale blue and gold, the colors of Mark's favorite pocket watch. I renamed it Meredith's Rest. Not a motel. A message. A place for travelers, widows, anyone needing peace. A place built not out of spite, but out of survival. And people came. Word spread. Softly, like morning light. Retired truck drivers. Young mothers escaping arguments. Grieving women looking for space to breathe. And then one day, my daughter came back. Storm in her voice. Her son trailing behind, quiet and ashamed. She said they needed help. Mortgage was overdue. Car was failing. The bank was calling. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the child I raised anymore. I said, that money wasn't meant to clean up your messes. It was meant to keep me from being one. She called me selfish. Said I'd abandoned her. But I didn't flinch. Because what she didn't understand was that for once, I wasn't acting out of guilt. I was standing in my own name. Her son stepped forward, touched my hand, and whispered, I love you, Grandma. I smiled through the sting in my chest and said, you'll always have a place here. Always. He helps me now. Folds linens. Greets guests. Sometimes just sits with me when the night is long and the stories are heavy. And my daughter? She visits. She volunteers. She no longer asks to come home. She asks how she can help me keep this home open for others. We're not perfect, but we're healing. Now, every morning, I light the lobby lamps, set out hot coffee, and write one more name into the reservation book with steady hands. Sometimes, a woman steps through the door with red eyes and trembling shoulders. And I say, you're not invisible. You're not a burden. You're home. If you've made it this far, thank you. And if you've ever been left behind, pushed aside, or told your voice doesn't matter, hear me now. You are not done. You are not worthless. You are not alone. Build forward. Not out of revenge, but out of remembrance. Because rest, real rest, isn't just where you sleep. It's where you finally start to live. The morning of our first holiday breakfast, frost clung to the front steps of Meredith's Rest like lace. I'd been up since dawn, humming carols under my breath while arranging trays of cinnamon rolls, folding napkins into little fans, setting fresh coffee to brew. Inside the lobby, the lamps glowed soft. A few volunteers filtered in, some from the church, others from down the road. And then, without a word, the bells above the door jingled. It was her, my daughter, face pale, eyes unsure. She held my grandson's hand like it was the only thing keeping her standing. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. But her eyes said it first. I'm sorry. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just raw, quiet truth. I walked to her slowly. She whispered, I treated you like baggage. You weren't. You never were. I didn't see it until it was too late. I took her gloved hand in mine. I forgive you, I said gently, but I won't return to being silent again. That chapter is closed. She nodded. No protest. Just understanding. My grandson looked up at me with wide, hopeful eyes. Can I help today, Grandma? I smiled through the tightness in my throat. Of course, sweetheart. I'd be honored. That day, we worked together in a way we never had before. She poured coffee. He passed out wrapped pastries. I greeted each guest with a hand on their shoulder, a calm smile, a quiet word that they mattered. A widow sat beside the fireplace, sipping cocoa, cheeks still red from crying. She reached for my hand and whispered, Thank you. This place gave me something my family didn't. Hope. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I had already cried those tears decades ago. Now I offered shelter instead. After breakfast, my daughter and grandson helped fold up chairs, carry out trash, sweep salt off the sidewalk. She didn't ask to come live with me. She didn't ask for money. Instead, she brought me a small ledger and said, "I want to help manage the scholarship fund. Quietly. Just let me give something back." I paused and nodded. That would mean everything. That night, after the last guest checked in and the volunteers had gone home, I sat in my office sipping chamomile tea. The halls were quiet. Snow drifted down in soft ribbons outside. My grandson curled beside me, reading the guest book aloud, entries from travelers who found peace in these walls. One page read, "Stayed here after my divorce. The kindness in this place stitched me back together." He looked up and said, "Grandma, you're kind of a hero." I leaned over and kissed the top of his head. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a woman who remembered what love built and refused to let grief destroy it." A week later, the local paper published a piece. A photo of the front porch. Me standing beside my grandson. My daughter carrying a tray of biscuits to a table of elderly guests. The headline read, "Widow reclaims her life and builds a home for others." Below it, the subhead, "Age is not a handicap. Purpose is." That sentence stayed with me. Because they were right. You see, it was never really about revenge. Not about freezing the account, or signing the deed, or drawing the line. It was about being seen, heard, respected, not just as a mother or a wife, but as a woman. Now, every time I walk the halls of Meredith's Rest, I touch the wall and remember the girl I used to be, the one pressed against a bedroom corner, praying the night would pass. She survived. I survived. And I built something with that survival. One day, I walked past room 4. A woman stepped out, robe wrapped tight, tears clinging to her lashes. "I just lost my husband," she said, voice cracking. "And this morning, for the first time in months, I didn't wake up afraid." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone here," I said. "You are remembered." She hugged me, and I held her like I was holding every version of myself who had ever needed that same reassurance. We are still here. We are still needed. We are still powerful, quietly, gently, in the way a tree grows or a river carves stone. If you've ever been made to feel discarded, forgotten, or erased, listen to me. You have the right to build. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that you were always enough. This motel, Meredith's Rest, it isn't fancy, but it holds stories. It holds peace. It holds me. And in the corner of the front desk, there's a framed photo of Mark and me. His eyes forever kind. His legacy now lived, room by room. That's my story. No grand ending. Just a quiet truth. If they try to bury you in silence, plant your roots. Let that silence bloom into something they can never take away. You are not invisible. You were never meant to be. And rest, true rest, is not the end. It's the beginning. Spring came early to Missouri that year. The last frost melted into the dirt roads behind Meredith's Rest, leaving behind a damp hush in the mornings. Everything smelled like beginnings, wet grass, blooming clover, the coffee I set out at sunrise for early checkouts, and the mailman who always lingered a few extra minutes just to talk. I started keeping a small vase of flowers on the front desk. Nothing fancy. Just wild daffodils I'd picked along the ditch out back, sometimes a sprig of mint or a cotton blossom from the old field near the creek. Little things. But after a life like mine, you learn that little things are often the biggest gifts. By April, the scholarship fund had grown. People who stayed just one night would slide folded bills into the donation box without saying a word. A retired nurse from Springfield sent a letter, saying she'd seen the article in the paper. She mailed a check and a handwritten note. "Thank you for building a place where women can breathe." I cried when I opened that letter. Not because of the money, but because someone else understood what this place meant. My daughter came by more often now. Not to ask for anything, just to help. She printed flyers for town halls, washed pillowcases, taught my grandson how to use the till at the front desk. Sometimes we worked side by side in silence. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest. One day she said, "I was so angry when Dad died. I didn't know what to do with it. I turned it on you." I said, "Grief makes monsters of all of us. What matters is who we become when the storm clears." She didn't cry, just nodded. And that was enough. There's a quiet routine to motel life. Some mornings I walk the halls with a linen cart, listening for the faint hum of radios or the sound of coffee mugs clinking. Sometimes I stop and knock, just to check on someone. Not out of duty, out of recognition. I know what it means to need someone to care without asking. Room 6 held a woman who hadn't spoken in days. Her son had just died in a crash out on Highway 84. She came in, pale and shaking, with nothing but a photo in her purse and sorrow stitched into every word she didn't say. I didn't offer therapy. I offered eggs, a blanket, a place to sit. She stayed for 5 days. On the 6th morning, she left a note that read, "You let me grieve without explaining myself." That saved me. I still have it tucked inside the guest book. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with my grandson while the sun sank low over the gravel lot. He asked, "Grandma, do you ever miss the old house? Before Dad passed? Before all this?" I thought about it. The wallpaper with little blue tulips. The clinking of Mark's spoon against his teacup. The way his slippers stayed by the back door like they were waiting for him to come home. "Yes," I said, "but grief is like a broken clock. It keeps ringing for a time that no longer exists. So you build something new, something real, and let the chimes go quiet." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he took my hand. The town threw a small celebration that summer for the motel's 1-year anniversary. They brought banners and folding chairs. Volunteers from the church baked pies. A local jazz group played out front under the elm trees, their horns echoing down the block like laughter from another time. The mayor said a few words. So did my lawyer, Henry, in his best suit and scuffed loafers. My daughter stood beside me while I cut the cake. She didn't take the microphone, but she looked me in the eye and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." It was the first time I'd heard her say that since she was a teenager. I didn't answer. I just kissed her cheek. By fall, Meredith's Rest had become more than a place to sleep. It had become a place to land. We hosted knitting circles on Thursdays, book club on Tuesdays. On Saturdays, I taught basic budgeting to young women who'd been left with more debt than dignity after bad divorces. One night, a woman told me, "This isn't a motel. It's a mercy." That stuck with me. Because that's what Mark gave me too. Not just money. Mercy. He left behind a shelter in a world that had none for old women with too many wrinkles and too few allies. Sometimes, I sit behind the front desk after dark and stare out the window at the flickering porch light. And I talk to him. "Mark," I whisper, "I kept your promise. I didn't disappear." Now and then, people ask why I tell my story. Why now, after all these years? The truth is, I kept quiet for so long that my silence started to sound like guilt. And guilt I never earned. I tell it now not because I need sympathy, but because someone out there still thinks they don't have the right to take up space, to own something, to draw a boundary, to begin again at 70. They're wrong. It's never too late to build your own door, especially if no one opens one for you. I've waited most of my life to speak these words out loud, not because I was ashamed, but because I thought endurance was the same thing as healing. But here's what I've learned, my dear listener. There's a kind of silence that protects and a kind that buries. For too many years, I lived beneath the second kind, still breathing, but buried just the same. Sometimes life hands you a motel key instead of a homecoming. Sometimes the people you raise forget how you once carried them. Sometimes you wake up one day and realize you are your own salvation. And so you begin again. Not loudly, not in spite, but like morning light warming an old porch, soft, steady, undeniable. To anyone listening who has been left behind, you are not the end of a sentence. You are the beginning of a new one. Your pain is real, but so is your power. If this story meant something to you, please leave a comment, or subscribe. Not because I want followers, but because someone else might find this video when they need it most. And know they aren't alone. My name is Meredith Collins, but around here, I'm just Meredith. Wife, mother, survivor, and founder of a place where rest is sacred. Meredith's Rest. The lights are still on, and the door is open. Come in when you're ready.